Hi, I'm Oliver, aged 24. Everybody knows that right-brained people are more artistic, creative and imaginative, and left-brained people are more analytical, logical and methodical. Except, it's not true. It's a myth. For years I believed it, and honestly, in some ways, it held me back. I love making music, recording videos and storytelling, so I figured I must be right-brained. Messy, unstructured, full of ideas, but allergic to planning and organisation. I always really liked the idea of coding games, but it seemed like something my right-brained self would be incapable of. It seemed too technical, too logical, too left-brained. Obviously, I was wrong. So let's talk about where this myth comes from, why it's such a big deal, and how I finally broke free to learn something I never thought I'd be able to do. Back when I was in school, they showed us diagrams like these ones with the brain split into two. We were taught that people are predominantly left-brained or right-brained, like being left-handed or right-handed. It was understood that right-brained people become artists, left-brained people become engineers. So naturally, I thought coding wasn't for me. But that's not how brains or creativity works. Where did this idea even come from? Well, I did a little bit of Googling and I found out it dates back as far as the 1800s. Scientists at the time discovered that damage to one side of the brain affected specific functions like language or motor skills. This led them to the idea that the left and right hemispheres might specialise in different tasks. Fast forward to the 1960s, and a neuroscientist called Roger Sperry conducted split brain experiments. This involved patients who had their hemispheres surgically separated as a treatment for epilepsy. Sperry found that when both sides couldn't communicate, certain tasks seemed more tied to one side in particular. For example, the left hemisphere appeared to be better at language, whereas the right hemisphere was more spatial and visual. These findings were fascinating, but they were simplified, misinterpreted, and sensationalized by pop culture. Instead of seeing the brain as a highly interconnected system, people started to see it as two parts working independently, one creative and one logical. In reality, the two halves communicate constantly through a thick bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum, which allows them to collaborate effectively. Corpus callosum would also be a great name for a metal band. Leave a comment below if you can guess what their first album would be called. As a side note, there is a small McNugget of truth, and that is that the left hemisphere of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side. So, no, your brain is not split into two departments reluctantly getting along like Shrek and Donkey. It's more like a dynamic duo working in sync. Batman and Robin, creativity and logic. Even a task that seems purely logical, like solving a maths problem, or a task that seems purely creative, like painting a picture, engages both sides of the brain. This collaboration between hemispheres is exactly why coding games, or anything creative, is actually a mix of both creativity and logic. There are so many different ways to approach coding the same functionality. So for example, something that seems simple, like a character jumping, there are just so many different ways you could tackle that. When it comes to video games, the end result is kind of the experience that players have when they play your game, and that can only exist through a combination of logic and creativity, which is why I do think coding is a combination of both. So even now that I know about the myth, I still find it really hard to see myself as a programmer, even though I know how to program games. I think it's partly down to imposter syndrome, but also I think because of the myth and other things within pop culture, I just had that feeling that I wasn't wired correctly to be capable of programming. I also have ADHD, which was only diagnosed a few years ago, and the symptoms of ADHD in theory sound like they wouldn't gel well with coding. But from my experience and what I've seen in the games industry so far, coding and being a coder doesn't have to look a certain way. You don't have to be super organized or write flawless code. It can be messy and chaotic, just like people, and that is okay. I think the reason why the brain myth has stuck around for so long is that it's human nature to try and put things in neat little boxes and pigeonhole things. You're either an artist or an engineer, a writer or a programmer. It's easier to put labels on things than to embrace the reality that sometimes things just don't fit neatly into boxes. But people and brains are way more complicated than that. Brains are capable of both creative and logical tasks. So if you've ever thought, I'm not a coding person, maybe this video gives you a new perspective. You don't need to fit into a box to be a programmer, an artist, or anything else. You just need curiosity, persistence, and a willingness to try and fail a lot. So whether you're coding games, making music, or drawing stick figures, remember, your brain is capable of both incredible and not so incredible things. It's neither left-brained or right-brained. It's just you. And that is enough. If you've watched this far, congratulations! You just used both sides of your brain at the same time. Wow. Fantastic! If you found this video interesting, please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.